She's right. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and glad you're here. And if you're going to be traveling through the holiday weekend this weekend, do be careful. And otherwise, we look forward to seeing you Sunday. We're expecting a overflow crowd as usual, and hope you'll be a part. And with that, there's altered schedule because of that. We're not doing the coffee and donuts before worship, and then Bible classes have been suspended for Easter Sunday, and then of course no evening activities. So keep that in mind as you prepare for this coming Sunday. All ladies are invited to a coffee cup painting event that will take place down at the place. This is across from Mike's Merchandise this Friday at 6 o'clock. The cost is $20 per cup. Space is limited to 30, so if you want to be a part of this, you need to sign up tonight on the ladies' bulletin board if you want to be a part of that. Children's Ministry Easter Party will be this Saturday from 1 to 3. There will be snacks, games, crafts, and an Easter egg hunt. If your child or grandchild is coming, please scan the QR code in the bulletin so that they'll know how many to prepare for that event. So keep that in mind. Our next Vacation Bible School workday will be next Wednesday from 4 to 6. We'll remind you of that this coming Lord's Day. Now, as far as our prayer list is concerned, a couple of updates. Charlie Catt, this is Debbie Teal's son-in-law, was to have surgery tomorrow. That's been moved until Tuesday, April the 7th. Charlie has a brain tumor back in the back of his brain, and they were taking him to the Emory Health Center in Atlanta, but that surgery has been moved to April the 7th, so keep that in mind. Sandy Clayton is now home, and orthopedic doctor does not think she needs any surgery at this time, but to continue the physical therapy, and he expects her to make a full recovery. We express our sympathy to Vanessa Kinnemer in the passing of her grandmother, Mary Saint. Graveside services were held for her yesterday. So remember Vanessa and her entire family. Others that we may not know about. And Buford, I didn't get that word about Charlie's surgery until just a while ago, or I would have clarified that before y'all had men's prayer group. But yeah, that's been moved to April the 7th.
I know some in here may know Randy Amos. He passed away. He was chief of police at Albertville for 10 years, and he's been in law enforcement for like 31 years, so he's well known.
Okay, Randy Ames, former police chief at Albertville, passed away.
He's also Greg Driscoll's cousin.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow, okay. Well, we'll remember the Ames family. Anybody else? It's good to have Kim Benefield and Ramona Rice back home after their world travels, and no.
His name is Randy Amos.
Oh, Amos, not Ames. Okay, Amos. Got it. All right. Anybody else? Let's bow. Father, we thank you for the beauty of the day and for the constant reminders of the newness that the spring brings with it. We're mindful, Father, of so many who will be traveling through the balance of a holiday weekend, and we ask for their safety. Mindful, Father, of those that are in our hearts tonight because of health issues. We are mindful of Charlie's surgery that has been moved, and pray that that would certainly go without further incident, and that they will be able to address the issues that he's been having. We're mindful, Father, of the family of Mary Saint and Randy Amos, and pray that you would be with both of these families as these loved ones are dealing with the loss of someone near and dear to them. We ask your blessings, Father, on our nation, the men and women in our military, and those that have purposely put themselves in harm's way to continue to protect us. We're mindful, Father, of your church that meets throughout the world, especially in difficult areas, and we ask a blessing on them as well. Go with us as we continue our study, and pray, Father, for insight and openness and a willingness to incorporate these truths that we find within your word. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, we're going to continue our study of the parables, and we finished up the trilogy from from Luke 15 last week with the story of, or as we termed it, a tale of two brothers, and otherwise known as the prodigal son. And tonight I want you to open to Matthew chapter 25. We've got a couple of parables here that we're going to investigate, and do one tonight, and then of course the one next week might take more than 1 week. Now that's that's banking on the fact that I get through this one tonight, because there's a lot there. I want to start because when you look at the first 13 verses here in Matthew 25, and if you have a red letter edition, which I do, and I'm not knocking red letter editions, I'm just reminding us that they were not original. That's publishers. But what do you notice? Well, everything's in red, because this is right in the middle of a teaching session that Jesus does. This is known as the Olivet Discourse that Jesus is sharing right before his the Last Supper, and then of course his subsequent arrest and trial and crucifixion. So we're in that time frame, and I love this parable. The first 13 verses, as I said, because we're talking about a wedding. Weddings are always interesting, and there's always there's that old adage: if anything can go wrong at a wedding, it will. And I have jokingly said that with all my years in ministry, and by the way, Marge, James agreed with me on this, that if I died and went to the bad place, that would be my punishment, would be to do one wedding ceremony after another. That would be, I would do one, and the devil would come out and say, "Oh, you're finished with that one? Well, please come. I've got another one waiting on you," which I'm kidding about that, of course. But, they are interesting in their own right. And there's so much that goes into and weddings and the planning and the traditions. And I was thinking, and I remind Daniel of this all the time, probably one of the most touching ceremonies I was ever a part of was Daniel and Katie's. That, to me, was one of the most touching ones. And neither one of our daughters were married at the time, and I didn't know then, but I know now because I was talking to Dr. Conrad, and he was all boogered up, and I said, I have no idea what you're going through. He said, it's like giving a grand piano to a chimpanzee. That was vintage Mike Conrad. Giving your daughter away is like giving a grand piano to a chimpanzee. And so if he only knew how right he is in that regard. And when Daniel gets on his high horse, I remind him of that. But anything can happen, at weddings, and they're wonderful. They're just great. And the thing about it is, it doesn't matter how much planning you do. Like the one we're going to see here, something goes wrong. Years ago, and I don't know that I've ever told this collectively, but it was pre-COVID. I want to say 17 or 18. I can't remember. Thomas and Alyssa Finley were getting married at Harding. They got married between Christmas and New Year's there on campus, and Thomas asked me, would we come out there and be a part of that? And we just couldn't wait. Just loved it because it was during the winter and they decorated the campus. It was just a great time. And we went out there, had the wedding, no big issue. We get home, and I had the license that I was to sign. Of course, now that in Alabama, now that's all changed. I haven't signed a wedding certificate in Alabama in 5 or 6 years because the laws have changed. But then in Arkansas, they had this big trifold, very elaborate license, and I did like I always do. I got home, and that Monday, we got home that Sunday at night. That Monday, I said, well, I'll just sign the license and mail it in. You're supposed to mail it back to the probate judge there in White County. And so I got ready to sign it, and I thought, wait a minute, it's had where I signed, and then it had page and line. And I thought, well, I don't know what that is. And so I said, but I'm not going. So I called out to a White County courthouse there in Searcy. Lady answered the phone, and she sent me over to the probate judge. And I explained to her, I said, I was there over the weekend, Saturday night, conducted a wedding. I want to mail the license in, and it's got signature and line and, page number and line. She said, well, yes, sir, that's where you put the page and line you were assigned when you registered at the courthouse. I said, what do you mean register? She said, you were supposed to go to the courthouse and register, and we would have assigned you a page number and a line number where the license will be recorded. I said, well, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And she said, well, they're not married. And I started laughing, and she goes, I ain't laughing. She said, you're going to have to marry them again. And I said, you're kidding. She said, no, sir. I said, they're in Disney World. So you mean I've got to hang up and call his mother and tell them, hey, they're not married. That's what you're telling me. She says, well, all I can tell you is when they get back in White County, you're going to have to marry him again. And I called Linda, and she starts laughing, thinking, I said, I laugh too, but they're not kidding. And so when they got back, they had just moved. They had moved them to Fayetteville, Arkansas, because they were starting school there. And I called the preacher at one of the churches, and he started laughing. He said, yep. He said, it's happened before. He said, have them come by, and I'll have them repeat their vows, and I'll sign just mail me the license. And so that's, so they were married twice. First time didn't count. But, I wanted to say, I've been to Arkansas. Y'all got a lot more problems than whether or not a guy registers at the courthouse to conduct a wedding. Sometimes they're the same. But that's probably the craziest thing that's ever happened. And I guess I need to knock on wood because, you never know. Well, it's in that setting we come here, and what's unique about this one is the way Jesus tells this parable. Now, 4 times already, if you go back to the 24th chapter, 4 times Jesus has tried to answer the question that his disciples have asked him about, when are you coming back? And 4 times he has given them the answer. You know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man comes. And that just doesn't seem like it registers with them. So they ask him again, and he doesn't say, well, I'm going to give you just kind of a general. No, he just says what? You don't know. I mean, if you go back earlier in chapter 24, let's see, verse 36, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels. Verse 42, watch therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. It's verse 42. Verse 44, you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Verse 50, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and in an hour he does not know. Now, when you read all 4 of those, what do you conclude? We don't know, you would think. But Jesus anticipates that, and so he then tells a couple of parables. And this parable, the one here in the first 13 verses, is a parable to remind us of the suddenness and the unexpected nature of the coming of the Lord. In other words, we should just be ready. We should just be prepared so that we're not caught unawares in that regard. So let's read it, and then we'll make some observations about this. The kingdom of heaven shall be compared to 10 maidens who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Behold, the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those maidens rose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "Perhaps there will not be enough for us and for you. Go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other maidens came, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." And he said, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you." Here it is again. "Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour." So, what time frame are we talking about? We're talking about when, here again, the chapter division there between 24 and 25 is unfortunate because there's no break in the discussion here. And this parable illustrates, as I said, the time period of the second coming. And the opening where he says, "Therefore, then the kingdom of heaven shall be compared to." And here again, it's kind of sandwiched between that statement and then verse 13, where he reminds them, nobody really knows. And so this is a very simple, it's rich, it's an exciting story, and yet we have to just kind of marvel at how simple it is. Unlike the parable of the soils, that where Jesus explains that, and it gets really involved, not so much with this one. Let's notice first the wedding. It's a wedding scene, and only that in and of itself, as I said, is significant, because as involved and as meaningful as weddings are in our world and in our culture, even more so, typical Palestinian weddings in throughout little villages and towns were quite typical. They involved everybody there in the community. It was the greatest event in a village or a town. It was the most celebrated event that those people knew anything about, and it involved everybody, family, friends, extended family, and it was a time of celebration. It was a time of festivity, all of the above. I think to really understand this, you have to understand a little bit about Jewish custom. Then there were 3 elements, 3 phases, if you will, that went on with any marriage. The first was the engagement. And long before the events here in the opening of chapter 25, there was an engagement. And the engagement was an official contract between the 2 fathers. And one who was giving their daughter, and of course the other one who was giving his son. And so the engagements weren't really made with the couple, they were made with the fathers. And a little while later, there would be what was called the second phase of the wedding, and that was the betrothal. And see, we've always had that backwards. We think, okay, they'll be betrothed when they're smaller, and then, no. In Jewish culture, you had the engagement, then the betrothal. Now, the betrothal was an official ceremony. The couple would come together before friends and family, and they would make vows, and they had an actual marriage ceremony where they made their commitments. And they were considered married because if anything happened during the betrothal period, they would have to go through a divorce. But the thing about this is, after this second phase, the couple would not live together for another year. So you had engagement, then you had betrothal, before you had that third phase, which is, of course, the wedding celebration, which is what we have here. It was, you look how that all kind of fell into place then. The parents were directly involved in this, and the betrothal was really wonderful because the vows were made, they were absolutely binding, and the groom spent that year getting ready to build a home for his bride. And here again, fathers made the initial engagement, the children made their vows, and there could be up to a year for the groom, the future groom, to get things ready to bring his bride into their home. And so what was unique about this is during that year, that was binding. Neither one could come up and say, oh, by the way, I think I found somebody else. No, they were considered married, but they weren't living together. And so here in the way this is unfolding here in Matthew 25, here's the bride. She's got all of her bridesmaids, and everything's ready. He's prepared a home for her, and now they're going to start the wedding festivities, and it was always at night, so they could have a procession through the village, and everyone in the village would enjoy that, and then the wedding party would go into the house, and the celebration would last 7 days. Remember in John 2, when Jesus changed the water into wine? This is what we're talking about. This is after the betrothal, and after the engagement, and then the betrothal. And at the end of the celebration, at the end of the 7 days, the friend of the bridegroom, who was like the best man, would take the hand of the bride and place it in the hand of the bridegroom, and everyone would leave. Hopefully, they're supposed to leave, right? And so it would be a marvelous evening, and everybody would leave, and then the bride and groom could begin their life there in their new home. So that's the wedding. That's the wedding process. A second thing we need to know is to understand the role of these bridesmaids. Notice verse 1. My translation says 10 maidens. Yours may say 10 virgins. But it meant young unmarried girls. They married so young in that culture. They were probably 14, 15 years old. And the Bible says took their lamps. Well, actually, the Greek word here means torch. And you've seen artist renderings of that. They're walking around with those little lamps, and there's a little flame. I'm thinking, I don't care if there's 10, if there's 20. That's not giving off a lot of light. It makes more sense to translate it torch. That's what they were. It's not the word lamp. And in Matthew 5, where in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says a man doesn't light his lamp and hide it under a bowl. That's lamp. This is a different word. And it's used, for example, in John 18, when the soldiers showed up in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they came in with torches. So that's what this was. It was on a long wooden pole, and on the top there would be some kind of wire mesh apparatus that would be filled with cloth. That cloth would be soaked in oil and then lit, and it gave, this literal torch, and they would carry those, from, in the procession, and everyone had a little flask of oil that they would redo when as long as it was necessary. So here you've got these 10 maidens who take their lamps and they go to the house of the bride, and they're waiting to meet the bridegroom. He's supposed to come and escort the bride to the house where the 7-day feast is going to begin, right? And so there are 10 of them, and apparently, the Jews were really enamored with the number 10. It took 10 people in order to eat the Passover, by the way. You had to have at least 10. You had to have at least 10 men in a village in order to have a synagogue. And it took 10 took 10 men, by the way, to give the wedding blessing. And so apparently these 10 bridesmaids were just kind of a proper number. And so they take their torches, and on the wooden pole they have the torch, and they bring it because it's like an invitation, if you will. Bridesmaids, in today's weddings may carry flowers, right, or a candle or something else. This is, the torch was the sign that I'm a part of this. I'm a part of the wedding party. Why? Because I'm carrying this torch. And they brought the torches along to light up the night sky in this wonderful procession there in the village. And it says they went to meet him. The word meet is interesting. Technically, it's the word used to refer to the greeting of an official, a newly arrived dignitary. So it's kind of a really important word here in that regard. And so we could, ask, how did they come up with 10? And we don't know. We just don't know. They have a part in this. They have on their wedding garments, and they have their torch. And they attend to the bride. They all have a role. And then verse 2 says what? 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Of course, Jesus is telling this, right? And he knows the hearts of everybody. So he makes that determination. 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. And in fact, the wording here is very interesting. 5 were sensible, thoughtful, or wise. And 5 were, the Greek word there is moros, M-O-R-O-S. It's where we get the word moron. In fact, one of the commentaries that I consulted, he said, based on the language, you could just base, one of the best translations of this is 5 had a brain and 5 were morons. That's it. 5 of them could think, did think, and there were 5 that did not. So they're very different. Now, looking at them, what? They're all dressed alike. They all have a torch. They're all a part of this. One commentator, I think, draws an interesting picture. He writes, quote, "There is not a more grand or a more beautiful spectacle on earth than a great assembly reverently worshiping God together. No line visible to human eye divides into 2 parts the goodly company. Yet the goodly company is divided into 2 parts. The Lord reads our character and marks our place. The Lord knows them that are His and them that are not His in every assembly." End quote. That's rather interesting, isn't it? And so Jesus says here are 10, and 5 of them are who they are and what they need to be, and then the other 5 are not. And so here is the wedding. Here are the bridesmaids, and verses 3 and 4. This is what happens. They that were foolish took their torches and took no oil with them, Jesus says, but the wise took oil in their vessels. And that is, those vessels they carried on their person that they would pour over the torch when the time came. And so they had the flask. The foolish ones had no oil at all. They made no proper preparation. It was all external. It was all, on the outside. It was all for looks. And as one writer said, they all made profession, but only 5 had genuine preparation. And so, if you follow this in the analogy, the oil then could mean any number of things, but in the story, it's what sustains the illumination in this. And so their faith, of course, of the 5 wise, is in stark contrast to the 5 that were not so wise. But the thing is, looking at them, you couldn't tell the difference. You didn't know it by looking at them. Jesus had told a parable earlier, and we may get to this one, where he says the kingdom is like a wheat field. And during the night, an enemy sows weed seed or tares, and they grow together. And the servant said, "You want us to pull the weed seed?" And the owner said, "What? No. If you do that, you're not sure which you're getting. So let them grow together, and then when they reach maturity, then you can tell the difference." And so this is basically repeated again. And it's really interesting that in this particular parable of the 10, the Lord didn't say one of them didn't have oil. He said what? 5 of them didn't. And we wonder, okay, well, what do we make of that? Are we saying that half of everybody in the church is not what they appear to be? No, it's not what we're saying. But it is rather interesting that if he's talking about the kingdom of heaven here, we would have to acknowledge that there are some who are concerned about the externals and appearances and the pretense. But when it's all said and done, there's not really a whole lot of genuineness there. And it seems to be that there's more of a significant number there than we might think. So, the Lord, has establishes this. Okay, now it comes to its point, verse 5. While the bridegroom tarried, they all dozed and finally fell asleep. The bridegroom tarries. And in this particular analogy, Jesus says the bridegroom doesn't come when they expected him to. It's later and later and later, and this is kind of, I think, a rather subtle hint to the disciples who think that the Lord is going to return immediately after his departure. This is why in Acts 1, if you remember, they're on their way to Jesus is really on his way to ascend back to the Father. The disciples don't know this. All they know is Jesus said, "The kingdom cannot come until I leave." And so this is when they very astutely ask him in Acts 1, "Lord, will you now at this time restore the kingdom to Israel?" In other words, what? When are you leaving? That was basically what they were saying. And of course, if they had known, what was going to happen, and just a few moments later, they would not have asked that. And so you've got this, you've got this going on, and this is how we know he's talking about the second coming and not the destruction of Jerusalem. Because if you go back to verse 34 of chapter 24, Jesus says what? "This generation will not pass away till all these things take place." Talk about the destruction of Jerusalem. Couldn't be talking about the second coming. Why? Because he would say 4 times before the end of the 24th chapter, nobody knows. Nobody knows the day or the hour. And we know as of April 1, 2026, at 7:05, he hasn't returned yet. Why? Because we don't know. And so, what we have here, it's not unusual that it gets to be midnight and the bridegroom is late, and they fall asleep. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with all, would it mean something if the 5 wise stayed awake and the 5 foolish went? But they all 10 fall asleep. The sleeping is not the issue here. And when the bridegroom comes and they wake up, the rest the wise feel rested and kind of refreshed because of that power nap, whereas the foolish are caught completely unexpectedly. So the bridegroom tarries, and you look at that, and it's just kind of a normal thing. Well, let's finish up and look here at the bridegroom, verse 6. And at midnight, there's a cry made. The cry went out. And by the way, midnight's kind of a funny time to start a wedding. I would say that's a bit odd. But the point that Jesus wants to make, he's simply saying what? No one would expect the wedding to be at midnight. That's his point. And so it's midnight. Now the bridegroom shows up. And so it's a fascinating way in which Jesus is making this point. Verse 7 says, then all the maidens arose and trimmed their torches. They readied the cloth, or the ones who had extra oil poured the oil on the cloth, ready to go. And those who had no oil, boy, they know they're in a fix. And here again, you don't know, Jesus doesn't explain what their thinking was. But the issue is they're caught unexpectedly. To the point, as we know, they're going to ask these others to share. Verse 8, the foolish said to the wise, give us of your oil, for our lamps are going out. The Greek says literally, they no doubt lit, it says our lamps are burning out. Ours are going out. Give us some of yours. Yes, sir. Right. Well, it could be I don't know, you may have a footnote there that basically indicates it might be inferred, but I think mine does too. Mine has it capitalized. Give us of your oil, for our lamps are burning out. And that cloth and everything that they had, it smoldered, maybe for a little while, and then it just went out because there's no oil, nothing there to keep the flame burning. It won't burn. And what's interesting about this, and here again, I don't want to go too symbolic in this, but if Jesus is talking about the second coming here, and he is, if he's talking about that, if the concept is, whether you're you die before the Lord returns, or if you happen to be alive, and that time comes and you're not ready or you're not prepared, this tells me that all the people in heaven, all the righteous people on earth, that they could stand there weeping on your behalf, but they can't save you. Salvation is non-transferable. And it doesn't really matter how good somebody else is, how close you are to their, and here again, it's not to interject that the wise were selfish, and no, that's not the point. The parable is not teaching selfishness. That's not it. It's teaching us, if I could say this without being misunderstood, the non-transferable nature of salvation. That when it comes to that point, if you're not ready, it's too late then. And that's always been the call, I think, of of salvation in that regard. And that's Jesus' point. You get ready now because you know you can, because there's coming a point when what? It'll be too late. And you can't change us. You can't change that. And so at that point, the saved, the 5 wise, can't change the situation of the lost. Give us your oil. It's a request. It's not an order. It's not an imperative. They're asking. But the 5 wise can't do anything about it, because they said, this is verse 9, lest there not be enough for us. Go and buy from those who sell. And the idea here is you've got to procure your own. And so what's interesting about this is in that culture, there was no shortage of olive oil. Oil was available, but probably not at midnight. Unless, I don't know if the Jews had a Walmart or something, but not at midnight. They had equal opportunity, just like the wise. They slept away those hours, just like the wise did, but they didn't have it. And the most fearful, and here again, I don't want to be over. Maybe painting with a broad brush here. This is one of the most fearful teachings of the Bible. And Jesus gave it over and over and over again, and that is that even within the church, there are people who are unprepared to face God. And they're they may be deceived by that. But in a moment, when they face the reality of that, as I said, it's too late. I mean, Jesus had said earlier in Luke chapter 6 and verse 46, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things which I say? Whoever comes to me and hears my word and does them, I will show you to whom he is like." And this is when he tells that great parable about the wise man and the foolish man. Same wording here, by the way. One built on a rock, the other one built on the sand. And so, Jesus has talked about this principle before. People who have built their religious house, if you will, but have no foundation. And it would be like having torches with no extra oil. And in that last moment, when they're told to go and get their own, verse 10, I'm about through. Verse 10, while they went to buy what? Oh, the bridegroom came. And they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and then the door was shut. No teaching now. No place to buy oil now. And the door was shut. That's quite a thought, isn't it? Well, notice verse 11. They go. The marriage feast begins, and it says, afterward came also the other maidens, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. Well, they won't in, but what? No oil, no torches. They're saying, look, we're part of the wedding party. We belong here. We're involved. And then verse 12, truly I say to you, I know you not. There's no second chance. And the only sure way to be ready on that unexpected day is what? Be ready every day. That's his point. Live every day as if that's it. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sure they probably would. I would think they would. But this is one of the things about the parables is Jesus will, and we'll look at this one a little bit when we get to the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan is so, original hearers of that would go, this is so ridiculous. The very idea that the hero of the story was a Samaritan. In their mind, they're saying this is just hyperbole. Well, he does that. He does that to prove a point. And here again, when you go to that famous story of the Good Samaritan and the young lawyer that asked the question, he doesn't realize it to the end. But who represents the young lawyer that asked the question? He's the hurt man. He's the hurt man that the Levite and the priest ignored. He's the hurt man that the Samaritan is the one that rescues. And this is why at the end of the story, Jesus said, now, which of the three, which one proved neighborly to the man who fell among the thieves? And the guy says, I guess the one who had, he couldn't say Samaritan. He said what? Well, the one who had compassion on him. Brad?
A lot of times when a parable starts with the kingdom of heaven is like,
Yeah.
it's going to be so unlike what we think it will be.
Exactly. Right. And he's talking about a very familiar, he's talking about a very familiar arena, and you can just imagine the people listening going, oh, that would just be the most horrible thing, is for the bridesmaids to not, for them all, for half of them not to make it, for half of them to not come down the aisle. Well, that's his point. 5 were ready, and there were 5 that weren't ready. This is why this final warning, watch therefore, literally keep on the alert. Why? You know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man comes. You don't know. And yet, we live in a time where we've got people that are constantly trying to pinpoint it. Trying to just identify, okay, it's going to be here, it's going to be, And this is the 5th time that he says it here. You don't know, you don't know, you don't know. So be ready. Just stay ready. And it's... you think, why does he have to keep saying that? Well, we've talked about this before, and I remember this when I was in graduate school. We were told at the beginning of every class had a research paper. You knew that when you signed. Every class had a research paper. It was due at the end of the semester. This would be January. Paper was due at the 1st of May. That's how long? Well, 4 months and maybe a couple of weeks. You would turn in your topic. You knew the first week of class, this is how long it is, 15 to 20 pages. You followed Turabian style, got all that done. And I couldn't get over the fact, and I was fortunate because Kim worked full-time and I went to school full-time. I could not write 2 papers at the same time. My brain doesn't work that way. And if you had 4 classes, that's 4 research papers. And so I would start and I would write one, and then I would go to the other. What I couldn't get over was I was so smug and pious, I would have mine ready like a week before the end of the term. I would purposely go to the library, the night before, and there are guys there frantically trying to get research. And I'm thinking, where's your oil, bub? You've known I was very judgmental then. Bless their hearts, they were probably working full time. A lot of them worked at FedEx, but I'm thinking you had all this time, and you knew when. Well, it's just like we used to do with 2 weeks from today, right? And they don't do it anymore because so many taxes are filed online now. But for the longest time, the 10 o'clock news would send some poor reporter out to the post office on the night of the 15th, and they're doing what? They're filming the postal workers taking tax returns that are trying to beat the midnight deadline. And, I always knew the last reporter hired because he was the one that got sent out there. But it's kind of the same thing. Now, Jesus even told us a parable about that too, didn't he? About people who were going to be saved moments before, but they didn't know that. They didn't know it. So that's why, even today, this is still a question mark. We don't know. Why? You live every moment as if it could be in the next 10 minutes or less. Maybe we better quit just in case. All right? We'll pick up here next week, and we're going to go just stay right in the 25th chapter, and we're going to go to the parable of the talents. And it too is not, it's different from this one. This one tonight was, you be ready. And the one next week is you be prepared, but the next one is you keep working. You don't sit back because the Lord's returning, I don't have to do anything. Nope. That parable is going to teach us it's just the opposite.